This is an opportunity for me to enter into one of the most stressful environments that I could enter into and practice being myself anyways.
If you're always putting it on other people for them to change, for you to be fine, then you're not taking ownership and responsibility for yourself.
Welcome back to another episode of the New Rules Podcast. It's your girl, Breezy, and we hope that you had a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family. I almost called you Pastor Adrian.
Yeah, that's fine.
I rarely call you that. Adrian, did you have a wonderful Thanksgiving with your family?
I actually did, yeah. I was actually supposed to go down to Tampa, but kind of wasn't feeling great. Family did not feel great, so we ended up just staying here, and it actually ended up being an incredible time. I was able to, spend time. My daughter's back in town from college. My son was actually playing down in Tampa, but we were able to hang out, and I was able to rest a little bit. I was actually able to work on some stuff, so that part was really, really good. It was fun. So, Bree, so why don't you tell me, how was your Thanksgiving? What all did you do?
He said it like that because I asked him how his Thanksgiving was, and then he just didn't say anything back.
Because I thought we do that, then we jump to the podcast. You asked me, hey, how are you doing? Yeah. That's right. I'll be much better. I didn't have two-way conversation.
No,
I was being selfish. It's cool.
We're in a goofy mood. I had a wonderful Thanksgiving.
What'd you do?
Two of my best friends came to Thanksgiving with me, and then we went to Disney.
You did go to Disney. I mean, you guys were literally acting like 8-year-olds there too, weren't you?
What
else is the point?
Oh, you got your little camera over there today and audio, so you're jumping into on the conversation now.
Yeah.
So everybody knows.
Lauren's on the podcast with us today.
Lauren's on the podcast today. She's gonna have a lot of opinions too. So wow, okay, but it was fun. Why do you like Disney so much?
I love Disney. I mean, do you want like a real honest,
yes,
vulnerable answer?
No, I want you to lie on the New Rules podcast about authenticity.
That we were looking at. I didn't know if we were going it's just fun,
Well, we talk about authenticity here, so I think we should go there. So yes, let's do it.
Well, I think because just as a younger kid, I had such a vivid imagination, but I lived so much of my life in isolation. I've been thinking about this a lot. How imagination plus isolation a lot of times can be a lot more terrorizing than it is. You create more dark worlds in your mind than beautiful worlds. So I think because I didn't learn how to really navigate having such a deep emotionality and a vivid imagination. Disney World was the first time as a kid I went somewhere that it felt like the worlds in my mind were real, but it was when you think of Stranger Things and there's the upside down and then there's the much more beautiful pure world. It was I was going from the upside down into the more beautiful pure world. So I think that for me, I'm not a Disney adult, so don't slam me. But I'm an adult who loves Disney. So yeah, it's just a lovely time. I think it's very, there's just so much there when I go there now because I got to go so frequently that it's I'm there looking younger me, in the face. I'm kind of walking in the places that she once was, but it's different now because I'm different and because I know myself, understand myself, and have such a deeper sense of purpose. So it's cool to do that. And then also, I just love roller coasters. I'm
really?
An adrenaline girl. I was, 4 at Six Flags. Please let me ride the roller coasters. And also I was a preemie, so I was the size of my finger at 4, and they're no, you can't do that. And I'm bet.
Yeah. So what? So at Disney, but when you think about that, roller coasters are Disney, because normally you go Islands of Adventure when you're down there to get the better roller coasters. So what's your what's your favorite ones?
But my opinion is that Disney offers you roller coasters with experiences.
Okay.
And so to me, I also just love immersive experiences and excellence in events. And when I've gone to Universal a few times, whenever I go, they have aspects that are done well, but even the ratio of a Harry Potter world doesn't even come against Star Wars at Disney or Cinderella's castle at Disney. So I think the scale is just so different. And to me, riding roller coasters, the adrenaline of it is fun. I don't think that Universal has the best roller coasters in the world. So if I'm going to the best roller coasters ever, just because I care about excellence, so I'm if I want to do it, I want to do it the best way possible.
Cedar Point.
I'm going somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Cedar Point, Sandusky, Ohio.
It's not that far from us. I'm going somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that if I want to go somewhere though that has like all around excellence and stories, you can go into so many different worlds. The shows are incredible. The culture is incredible. And I'm also obsessed with how do people scale like culture in that way as an adult too. So I think that's why I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go to Disney and then I'm gonna get the best of both worlds. But I mean, like a Tower of Terror is iconic. Iconic story.
Yep.
The adrenaline from the drop is incredible. And that's different than like you go to a She-Cra at Busch Gardens and of course you get the drop, but you don't have this immersive experience.
Dude, Busch Gardens, I don't know why, but anytime I think about Busch Gardens.
You're a hater?
I 100%. I'm like, Busch Gardens is like Busch Gardens is like the Walmart of like of theme parks to me. It's like, you know what I mean? And again, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I mean, again, it's and I say that to say in the real way, it's affordable, as people can go there. But when I go to Busch, I like when people say, man, we're going to Busch Gardens. I'm like, nah, y'all going to Busch Gardens.
See, I would rather go to Busch Gardens than Universal.
Heck no way.
Really? I'm against Universal because I think it's a Disney wannabe. So I'm like, I would rather just go to Busch Gardens that is its own thing and you know what you're getting versus going somewhere that you have this expectation of it being as excellent as something else and you look around and you're like, I mean, I walk in and I'm like, there's about 20 other things that you could have done with this that would have made it like 10 times better.
Yeah, I can understand that.
Yeah, well, I just went to Disney, but you just recently went to London. I don't think we've got to update the people on that yet.
Yeah. Yep. I actually went to London. I take a solo trip every year. And the reason why I ended up doing it is because my favorite rap group, The Clips, they've dropped their first album in like 16 years. And so they're doing their tour. And so I was supposed to go to Orlando. And then we had a client emergency that we had to go to Chicago. So I had to miss that concert. So I was like, man, I would love this. I was like, I want to see them. Because normally I'll end up just chalking up, like, forget it, whatever. But I did that one time going to see Justin Timberlake and Jay-Z. I gave those tickets up. And I can't believe I did that.
I actually wake up at night thinking about how you missed that.
Dude. And so I was like, this moment, I'm like, man, I can't miss this. So I started looking and it was like, it was this place in the States and I'm like, oh, they're going to be in London. And I've always wanted to go to London. So
which is crazy you've never been because you've lived in Spain.
Yeah. And so I get all the, I started looking at it. I had a lot of miles and things like that I could actually use. So I did. And so I set up this whole thing and it was amazing. I actually could live there. I will go back again. And then when I go back, I'm actually going to probably then take a train to Paris. So because Paris is my favorite city, but I want to compare them like back to back because like I love, like, London is, it's iconic. It's got incredible, like, the fashion part of it's great. The historical part is great. And again, it's like, it fits my vibe. It's cold. It's rainy. It's just, like, the whole deal. And I think the thing I loved the most about London was the fact that I did this tour. Outside the concert was great, but, like, I did this tour, this one-on-one tour with the guy who took me through London, and Winston Churchill. So, I've been talking a lot about studying him. So this guy's a Churchill historian. So I got to walk around, took me places. Then I went to the Churchill War Museum, which is underneath. It's like it's the literal physical space that during World War II, it was their hidden underground bunker that they had. So they just now turned that into this museum. And so you get to go down there and see all the stuff. And it was fascinating doing that. Yeah, so I had an incredible time.
Well, that's incredible because our last episode was on belief, and we did talk about Churchill within that episode, and that was leading up to your trip.
Yep. Yeah, and he was, and I tell you what, I was more amazed at his belief being there because, when you physically are standing there and, and you're right outside the building where he would go on top of the building and would look over and he would see the bombing that was happening to London every single night. Like just the belief to still think this is the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. Just the belief when you're down there and there seemed like when it goes to Dunkirk and it was like, man, almost, majority of their army would have died. If they did not come up with this creative idea that he did to actually get people their own, like just everyday common people, their fishing vessels to go rescue all these soldiers. I think I was also blown away is his creativity. That was the one thing I didn't know a lot about, like the idea of a tank, like, the tanks we use in the military. He was the one who came up with that concept and idea of fashion, the hats he wore, the clothes he wore, I got to go to the tailor that actually made his suits. I got to sit in the place. I smoked a cigar in the same place that he bought his, in the same chair. I mean, it was just this whole experience. And so just his impact on just culture at large was really special. And his belief was just unbelievable.
Well, I guess why I will say that this matters for the listeners is that every year, I think that one of the things that we do a really good job at is we try to put ourselves in situations and experiences that can emotionally and just experientially shape us. So whether it be when you're going to London, like you've been thinking about Churchill for a lot of your life, but you've been thinking about him more extensively over the past few months. And so whenever you invested in the trip to go see someone like Eclipse or to go through the walk on Churchill, you were hoping to continue to learn something that was going to shape you more deeply so that you can have the momentum that you need when you come back here in order to build the things that we're building.
Yeah, it absolutely, because, when you're in a different environment, I think creativity gets sparked. I think it can spark parts of you that maybe have been dormant in your life. It begins to give you, like new wind, fresh vision. Also, when you just have space, there's no like expectation or whatever. You just got space to do things. And I made the trip really quick, only like 48 hours. But it was like a lot got done, but I also felt like I was like really well rested. I didn't feel like, crazy exhausted or whatever when I got back. And so I was just super, it was just amazing. I encourage people, if you have the means, or even if you can't go somewhere like that, I understand that's like a little bit much like, oh, I went to London, but like, even if it's like, man, you have a town or somewhere that's, maybe an hour away or 30 minutes away that you say, hey, I'm just going to take the day. I'm taking the day off of work and I'm just going to go there. And when you're there, just walk around, be able to just experience, learn, because those things actually help begin to build new memories, new kind of, I think, new pathways through your brain to do stuff. And so I think it was, when I was there, I did a little bit of writing and stuff like that. But what I have done when I came back, then we had to go to Chicago for a client. Then when I came back here, my brain was just so full of stuff that I was able to I did a ton of writing over the last like 4 or 5 days. And so I think that really went back to that trip.
All right, well, today we are going to do something very special. We actually took a moment to survey our listeners. We asked them to send questions related to one specific topic. Lauren, do you want to share with the people what the topic was? Lauren is going to be on camera and chatting today.
Oh, look at that. Look at that.
We asked our listeners what is something regarding being home for the holidays when you're in kind of complicated situations sometimes. What they would like to ask for advice on, family, friends, if not for themselves, for people that they care about.
Nice. All right.
Perfect. So Lauren is going to ask us questions today, and we are going to answer. We're going to answer them.
All right, let's do it.
Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, our first question is, when I'm home with my family for extended periods of time, especially around the holidays, I notice I tend to either detach or become reactive. I don't want to argue, so I often check out completely. I want to be present, so what are some in-the-moment practices that can help me stay grounded and engaged? I feel like I've done the deeper work of forgiveness and awareness, but the tendency to check out is still strong. And how can I tell if I genuinely have forgiven them when I still get irritated?
That's such a loaded question. That's like 4 questions in one.
I would say the first thing is it's always, I think, one, it's preparation. I think preparation is very important when you're going there. I think a lot of times people think about when I'm going on a holiday or I'm going to visit my family, whatever. It's like, oh, it's just I'm going on vacation, so you don't really have to prepare. Maybe you're going back to your hometown, so you're not like putting an itinerary together. But I think what people do not do is actually emotionally prepare themselves for what they're going to go into. And so I think that's the first thing. I think you have to understand what you're getting yourself into. So what does that mean? That means that if prayer is a big part of your life, that you really are doing that before journaling, do that. You're actually thinking about before you go, you're not putting yourself, if you can help, in crazy stressful situations, because you're going to be going into a probably crazy stressful situation when you go back home. So I think the preparation is super important. I think the other thing that you have to do is that once you are there, I think you have to understand, and I think a lot of times why we struggle is when we go home is because I think codependency is a really big thing. So we don't know where they end and where we end and the next person really like begins. So you think about, you go there and you start to think, oh man, well, if I, like, for example, if I've forgiven, then I won't detach. I won't do these things. But it's like, no, sometimes you may not be detaching. You may just be, for the first time, actually putting up a boundary of like, I'm not going to engage in that. And it can feel like detachment. And so I think you have to understand healthy boundaries of what are you going to get involved in, what are you not going to get involved in. I think the other thing too is that you got to give like people like grace while you're there. And you have to have, here's probably the biggest thing, you have to have proper expectations. Your parents or a sibling or whatever, it's like they're probably going to be who they are. So going in there expecting them to be different is not like, I don't think that's the part where that's okay, because now you're going in with a false expectation of them. But if you go in knowing, okay, I know I'm going to come in here and, my dad's going to ask me a question about, how much money I'm saving. My grandma's going to ask me, hey, are you getting married anytime soon? Or like, hey, whatever the stuff is, or maybe you're the one when you come home, they're always just making jokes about you or doing stuff like that. You just have to know that. And just know, oh, I know this is what's going to happen. And because that's when people get messed up, it's because it's an expectation versus reality, and we fall into that chasm. And so I think that's a big thing, is knowing what proper expectation is, and then also knowing, man, this is healthy boundary. It's okay to like, just no, I'm not going to engage with that. I also would tell you that while you're there, man, make sure you got time where, when I say when you're there, oh man, get up in the morning, have a morning routine, do things to prepare yourself. Just like, because I think we just go with the flow, and what you're going to do is go back to the same behavior and actions you did when you lived there. That's what most of us do. When you go back home, we just revert back to the kid, and we revert back to how the kid was and doing the same patterns the kid did. And I think that doesn't help us. So
I think what I'll add to it is that oftentimes, like you said, why the preparation is so important is because it's really easy as the holidays start to approach, if you come from a dynamic that you're not necessarily incredibly excited to enter, you can start your mindset with this feeling of dread. And so by the time you're there, you've already decided that you want to be somewhere else. And so that's why I think that feeling dysregulated or feeling disconnected isn't always equal to I have not worked through the process of forgiveness. And also the process of forgiveness is that it's a process. And every time you go home, and not just home, anytime you're entering somewhere where there's history, you are going to find out more information that can make you feel any type of way, whether it be about the past, whether it be about yourself, somebody else, or the future. And so I think that one of the most important things, like mindset wise, is especially if the standpoint of this question is that you've done some of the deeper work, the process of healing and forgiveness, is this is an opportunity for me to enter into one of the most stressful environments that I could enter into and practice being myself anyways. Once you enter it with that mindset, the goal is no longer, I need to change somebody. How can I keep certain things from happening? It shifts from externally to internally. How can I continue to practice to be a person who embodies my values, who shows up truly as myself, environments that are incredibly stressful? Because I think the truth is, for everyone, regardless of how much, or not how much, but like the tier of trauma that you've experienced, everybody, when they go into an environment that is their origin story and has a lot of history, naturally it just stresses you out a whole lot more. And so I think just a valuable mindset for everyone is walking into environments that are stressful with a mindset of, how can I grow in my level of resilience? How can I grow in my ability to regulate when I'm in stressful situations?
yeah, no, that's good. And I would also say, because going to your point, is like you made a great point about the idea of like practicing being yourself. And I think what gets a lot of people really messed up is when you start doing that, the expectation you have of how those people should respond to you. You think, oh, I'm showing up as myself, and now you think they're all gonna like change. Like, oh my God, you're just the most wonderful person now.
I'll feel a greater sense of love and acceptance because this is
and they're
my
like,
family.
no, they're gonna still be who they are, and they're gonna still probably do some of the same stuff. And so you have to be okay with that. Which again, I think that's a good thing for us to learn. Like, are you trying to be yourself? because of approval, because that goes back to probably why you were in the place that you were in. And what I mean by that, like a lot of times our identity is formed by the approval of people. And so I think that's what you're saying is a great point of that. You are not responsible for their reactions, what they say, what they do. You've got to be yourself as you move through that process. So.
Going off of that question, how do you accept people's limits? When you find yourself constantly longing for or expecting people to be better, but you can tell the gap is what is creating the tension, how do you just accept people where they are when you still long for them to be better?
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. I would say that I think you can long for someone to be better. I think for me, this is how it helps me. How I actually stay in a good place with that is I go more to a place of thankfulness of that I could be in that same place. You know, when you start thinking about like your family, your mom, your dad, your whatever, like, you know, you have their DNA. You could be down that same road they've been down. But whatever it is, whatever you believe, you know, you are now not down that road. Maybe it's the therapy. Maybe it's your, you know, you've had some type of religious experience. Maybe for you, you know, it's a mentor, whatever. But you're not there. And so what I think keeps you in the right place is humility keeps you in the right place, because you realize if it wasn't for those, like that one thing or this one situation, you may be in that same place. So it allows you to stay in the process of not being arrogant. So I think that's what happens. Sometimes we tend to be like, man, we don't mean to do this, but we're better. We're in a better place, and you should get here, and you need to get here, even though it's coming from a place you long for them to be better. But I think when I realized, man, it's just for me, it's my faith of like, man, it's the grace of God that I am farther along, and I'm just thankful for it. I think that helps me stay in the right posture.
I think that's a really good question, but I think so much of it comes down to, why do you want people to change? And I think if we're honest with ourselves, especially when we're talking about a family dynamic, most of the time we want people to be changed and to be transformed into whatever person we see them to be, because we want them to love us. We want them to accept us, and we want to feel that from them.
Yep.
The motivation isn't because I want them to have a life of love. I want them to have a life of excellence. And I think that's where it's good to have expectations of people that are good expectations, for people to grow, for people to change over time. And people are always going to fall short in that sense. But what determines whether that desire is good, I feel like has so much to do with your intention and why you hope for people to change.
Yeah, I would agree 100%.
How do I hold the tension of being cordial and being authentic when the familial elephant is in the room? The elephant can be anything, but an example is my siblings are both home for the holidays. They haven't spoken to each other in years, but they talk to me while actively ignoring one another.
Yeah, that's wow. Yeah, that sucks. Yeah, I think that
That sucks.
no, I mean, no, I think in those moments, again, it comes back to, some of it's going to sound like we're repeating ourselves, but it really is this. It's, you're not responsible for their behavior or for where they're at. So you just have to be you. You have conversation. That's fine. They choose to ignore each other. You know what that does? Just think about when you're ignoring somebody. Like when you ignore somebody, you're in the same room with them. Like the internal emotional like energy that takes to do that. I mean, that's just miserable sometimes. So it's like, they're miserable in the process of this. And so your job is like, man, I'm just going to just be me, have conversations, talk to them. They want to ignore each other. That's on them. The thing I would tell you is not to get into a triangle where all of a sudden the one sibling wants to talk about the other sibling. I think that's where you really have to step up and say, no, hey, listen, if that's bothering you so much about them, go talk to them. But I'm not going to get involved with you two doing that, because that keeps you, that's a healthy boundary for you to stay in the right mindset and the right mind frame. But again, it comes down to not allowing other people's reaction and emotion to then begin to push on you to change you. And I think that's what we tend to do a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think an honest expression, if we're saying, what does it look like to be authentic in that moment? Oftentimes it just comes back to say your experience in the moment. So even if it's later or just to one of them, the goal isn't trying to get them to talk to one another. It's just saying, hey, do you guys realize that whenever you do this, because you haven't resolved your conflict with one another, it makes everybody uncomfortable? that when we come to Thanksgiving or we come to Christmas, we're uncomfortable having to be in a room with people who don't want to address the tension that's between them. And I am uncomfortable with that. Or that's frustrating, or that's sad, or, you know, whatever that might be. And you expressing that isn't to try to get them to change. It's you just saying, hey, I'm here, this impacts me, and I want you to have an understanding of how that's happening. Because the truth is if that's the immaturity, and that's the stance that they're taking, the likelihood of them even thinking about how that impacts you, like you said, it takes so much emotional energy to do that. They're not really considering that, and they might not even have the like maturity yet to truly understand that. And so you just saying how that really feels in the moment. And then the truth is what resilience looks like is you then dealing with whatever feelings come about your feelings when they don't change, when you share that. It's like, well, now I'm even more frustrated because, you know, this impacts me and you're not willing to change. And now I'm sad about that, or whatever that might be. But that, again, I think is another opportunity for you to practice. And you're not going to do it right. It's like, I feel like so much of being home and being with family, it's like a case study. You just kind of got to walk into it a little bit more objective. Like, this is a pressure test environment for me to try different things. And what does it look like for me to, again, be myself in different environments? And you might not do it right. And then that's when you're transitioning back into your day-to-day life. Make sure that you're actually reflecting on the time and how you did as well.
Yeah, it's good.
I love being with my family. We usually get along, but tend to sweep things under the rug. What's better, keeping everyone happy during the holidays or addressing real needs and problems within the family?
This is just a wisdom take.
Yep.
If you don't have regular proximity with your family, if you decide not to talk to them on the phone, if you just have this general distance, going home for the holidays and using that as the opportunity to address all the things that haven't been addressed because you're frustrated and whatever that might be. My like personal take on wisdom is that that's just not kind, because it sounds like if the holidays is the one time where you're together to do that, then you don't have the proximity, you don't have the relational equity, you haven't necessarily put that time into the relationship either. And I understand that maybe it's that I want my parents to reach out. I want my parents to own this decision. And so when I go home, I'm so frustrated and things aren't happening right. And I'm like, oh my God, all this stuff is not, you know, paid attention to. But I think some of it is, yes, you can outgrow your family and you can be in a place where you're in a greater level of maturity. And unfortunately, that means that you are now the adult in the room. And the adult, kind, wise thing to do is to not go home for the holidays and use that as the time to address all of the conflict that's swept underneath the rug.
Yeah. Bree, honestly, that is really incredible wisdom. And I would encourage any of you who to play that back and to listen to that. And I'll kind of go a little bit deeper is because I think sometimes for us, we go into those environments and we feel like, man, to be authentically, like, it goes back to what you were saying earlier, be authentically myself, but also like, I want them to love me. I want this, not what's the best thing for them. We just get into those environments and we're like, no, we're about to turn it up. We're going to, we're going to be a truth teller. We're going to be reconciled. I'm going to be a reconciler, and let's say you even have like a spiritual component, like, you're a Christian, then you'll really be like, you'll start using scripture. I'm called to be a peacemaker. Or I'm called to do this. And then you'll justify being a peacemaker. Well, sometimes getting peace means you got to stir stuff up and you're like, no, like you don't. Sometimes, you know what? It's okay. You got to learn how to sit and learn the nuance of stuff. And that's a really hard thing because, like, for me, I hate being in environments where you have to fake stuff. Where you're like, I know we don't really want to be here. And this person, I'm like this person. I'm like, can we just like deal with that? Just say it. But what I've learned in building organizations even is sometimes, like, like, I know at times for people that are going to go or at some point in time, I'm going to have to move them out of the organization. And that's really difficult for me because I used to be like, no, I just want to be up front with them and just tell them it, whatever. But realizing, like, that's not kind. Like, it's not kind because here's the thing. If I know they're not going to receive it, why would I say it? Because all it's going to do is just create more like drama. And so I agree with you. I just think sometimes you just got to just sit there and again, it goes back to what I said earlier. What's the expectation? When you're prepping, what is the expectation of this family trip? Hey, man, I just want to go in there and and even if it's at a surface level, enjoy my family at a surface level. Fine. That's okay. Because then we're like, well, I just want to have deeper relationships with my family. I'm like, well, do you have deep relationships with other people? man, enjoy those deep relationships. Not everything has to be during this time right now at the level you want it to be. I mean, having family dynamic stuff, it's like, man, there's just sometimes where I'm like, yeah, I'm not getting into that. And it's just going to be surface level. It's what is, I wish it was deeper? I do. But I'm also like not about to stress myself out on something right now that I don't feel like I need to stress myself out on. And it just will be surface level. And that's okay. That's fine. I've got deeper relationships other places.
I'm working on forgiving my family for various ways they may have hurt me in the past. What does it look like to show up and honor them in the meantime?
I would say humility is vital in how you show up well. Because what I always try to remind myself, how maybe your parents may be the villain in your story right now because they may not have said they're sorry. They may have done real things that cause real pain. But if you're a human, you've been the villain in somebody else's story. And there may be places in your life right now where someone sees you in the exact same way you see your parents. So humility allows you to go in with a sense of genuine empathy, not justifying what they did, but also not making yourself better than they are. And so that allows you to be in that moment to still see them and respect them, and not respect their decisions they made or things they did to hurt you. But I still can, as a human being, have an honor that's there because you know what, man, I've maybe done something, or you know what, I may be one step away from making a decision. I could become a villain in someone else's story. I think that's what happens. The older I get, the more I just have, people say this. I think it's when you get older, one, you don't have the energy just to be mad at stuff all the time. When you're younger, you're just like, dude, you got a lot of emotional energy just to turn up at everything. When you get older, you're like, nah, I ain't got it. And so I'm not going to do that. And I think the other thing too, you just have done life enough and you've seen yourself hurt people. And if you're emotionally healthy to see that stuff, you just have a greater grace for those other people because you're like, yeah, man, I've made those mistakes too. Now, again, in our world today, that's hard to say because most people, we live in such an anxiety-filled world that drives black and white thinking that to be okay with a parent who caused harm to you does not, that feels like and today I feel like we're violating our authenticity. You're not violating your authenticity. You're saying what they did was wrong, awful, whatever. But you're also saying, but as a human being, I still do respect you. And you know what? Sometimes you just got to pick one thing. What's the one thing that you respect about them? Because I guarantee you there's one thing that I enjoy this about my parent. They may do all this other crazy stuff, but I enjoy this thing. And so just remind yourself of that, and think of that instead of all the other stuff. It's kind of my thoughts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think that, that's such a wonderful question. And it really is so nuanced because you're starting to get into what do you mean by harm? How volatile is the environment that you're walking into that adds so many, this is like a really gray subject. But I also think that just mindset wise, when somebody has done you wrong in general, the goal is not for you then, especially if you're a Jesus follower, for you to bring justice or for you to bring a level of ethics. And this is where I think there's so much nuance in the story of Jesus, but that is ultimately good, is that there are time periods where justice and what is ethical does not feel fulfilled, but the story of Jesus says that justice is timeless and that what is done eternally will always be good. And so when you're in that middle time where things are incredibly uncomfortable, I think, again, just in terms of posture of your heart, is to pay so much more attention to is what is this experience like for me? When I think that I'm bringing honor, how much of it is just that I'm completely losing myself in order to show up within this environment? How much do I not consider what it's like to be curious and compassionate to the people that harm me, and I just want to come into the environment and fully bring the wrath of God and make sure everybody knows what was wrong, that. So much of it has to do with your heart posture and what are you hoping to have fulfilled within the moment, that it might not be the time for that to show up right now, and it might not be purely driven by your will or your capability in order to deliver that.
Yeah, no, and I will tell you is that as you learn to draw healthy boundaries and you do it from the right posture, it may feel like harmful to your parents. Like they may feel some type of way, but what it does, it gives you those are moments where you get a chance to actually share in a calm way why you do that. So all of a sudden, a parent may say, hey, I want to, they may want to talk about something or whatever, or go down this road, and you're like, hey, I'm not going down that road with you. Well, why don't you want to go down? Well, because here's why. Because honestly, I'm still frustrated. I'm still angry. I feel like this has happened there. And I want to just I just want us to be here and have a good holiday. And I don't want to go down that road because I don't think I'm in the place right now to have that conversation in a way that can be fruitful, and that can be helpful to us in this time. And what I think that does is that honestly, when you do stuff like that, it puts them back on their heels of like, now they may say, well, no, it wasn't that bad, whatever. You just have to say, nope, I'm still not gonna have that conversation. And what you start to do with parents, it's interesting. As you get older, it's like you literally have to become like what your parents were for you as like a child, you become for your parents. You end up having to put boundaries because like your parents, like they just have always been the ones like ruling and reigning and pushing your life. And now you become a functioning adult. You pay your own bills. You do your own stuff. You do whatever. And they still want to like be like how they were when you were in their home. Right. And you're like, no, And so, I mean, I had to have that with my dad. I'm like, yeah, man, like you're in my house. I like don't ask you for anything. You don't pay any of my bills. You don't do any of those things. So it's like, no, you're here. Here are the rules. Here's how it goes. Da, da, da. And that's difficult, but it's just part of life.
Right. This time of year typically puts me around people who shaped my earliest years, habits, and relational skills. How do I measure my resilience when I'm able to be more me everywhere else, but I still revert when I'm back in the places that shaped me?
Yeah. I would say something that we communicate here all the time. I think in those moments, you have to be curious and compassionate to yourself. I think that that's normal. So I want to first say that is normal, that you're going to revert back to that place because it was the most formative years of your life. When I get around like my father, I can just revert, like the internal parts of me wants to revert back to the kid who that was my hero and all the stuff and da-da-da. But what you have to do is not judge yourself, but be like, man, in that moment or throughout that time, it's like, okay, like you start to feel some type of way. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? What was that about? Because I think it gives you more information. It gives you more data about, man, your upbringing, things like that. And I think you can actually start getting to the root of those things. So I would just encourage you, be curious and compassionate. Don't judge yourself because you feel that way or that things happen, but actually be willing to have some toughness to lean in to those feelings and ask yourself why, what's going on, and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I think that we talk a lot about this analogy of water in a telephone booth. And we use it for an analogy of anxiety. And so we talk about it on a scale of 1 to 10. Where's the water at in the telephone booth? 10 being like, it's completely over my head. I'm drowning. 8 is like, it's right at my neck and I'm trying so hard not to go underwater. And I think that if you think about that scale of anxiety and where you're at whenever you are in that environment, it's going to tell you how well are you going to be able to know when you're reverting back real time and why. Because the more you're underwater, the less you're going to be able to see clearly and have an understanding of where am I reverting in the moment. That's why practically pregame and postgame is so important. Like,
absolutely,
I think
yeah.
The best thing, like when I go home, I love driving. So it's like I have 4 hours before I'm there, and I have 4 hours whenever I'm leaving to come back and just like think and reflect and also prepare for the time. And so before you go into it, the question being, how do you measure your resilience? Resilience starts so much with self-awareness. Do you have an understanding of where you're currently at? Where are you going out of your original form, if resilience is bouncing back to that original form? And so the pregame matters because there are things that you probably already know. Like when my mom talks in this tone, I get loud and I get snappy. Like there are patterns like that I think everybody can have. And so think about that when you're going into the space. What are those things that are going to show up, and what are indicators that tell me that I'm about to start doing that? Can you actually track that? I start to feel whatever in my body, I start to get quiet, my tone starts to shift, and see how much more you can pay attention to that within the moment whenever you're in the space. And then once you leave, think about, okay, where did that happen? The goal wasn't for it to not happen. At this point, like the phase really is, how can I view it again like a case study and look back at it and see, did I do a little bit better this time than I did the last time? I actually want to add something to this though. I think there's something about being with your family too that isn't always discussed right now, but for like when I go home, like my family's not the same family that I left the last time. Like they are also changing people too with experiences and thoughts, and that doesn't mean that they're always changing in the direction that maybe would be my preference or at the speed or the level of what that might be. But in the same way that you feel like your thoughts and your ideas and who you are is changing, if you're someone who goes home once a year for the holidays, I can guarantee that there's probably a whole lot that happened that year, even in their minds, even just what they're thinking about too. And so I say that just because sometimes I think in our mind, it's like our parents are frozen in time, but we're ever evolving. And it's like, well, no, really, like there are things that are happening with like your dad that's like there's something different that's going on every time. And so the reason why I think that matters is just a perspective that I'm not the only one changing, and there are ways that I can still show up with curiosity and compassion towards what's going on that isn't completely the surface level conversation, but isn't like the depths of all of the terrors of our lives and like how we all hurt one another. That's just like, hey, what's something that you've been thinking about this year? And it might be the really annoying politics conversation. But again, how do you show up as a non-anxious presence within that conversation would be a place to test your resilience.
Yeah, and I'll say this is part of it. I don't know. Some things you just realize, certain people, that there are things that they're never going to change. And I'm just a firm believer, expectation and reality. Mm-hmm. I think that sometimes you just have to, when you are you using your awareness now to recognize that, like there's just certain things people are not going to change. And you can let it keep bothering you, or you can say, okay, no, I'm going to put a boundary here, but I don't have an expectation for that to change in their life. And that doesn't mean you don't care for them or want the best for them, whatever. They're just not. And I think when I've learned to settle with those things, and I've learned to settle with this, I'm not changing anybody. That's probably the biggest thing. I think we all think we have this, like, we're like magical, that we can change human beings and their behavior. You cannot. Like, you cannot change humans' behavior. And what I mean that you can now help them, you put boundaries up, whatever, but that's got to be an internal thing that they desire to want to change. And then they desire to go get the help. But you're just by your presence, you're not going to, like, Jesus could do that, but we're not Jesus, so nobody else is going to change that. So
Okay. Lately, I've realized I may have outgrown some of my hometown friendships. Yet when I'm home for the holidays, there's still an expectation to meet up. I've also heard them criticize people who moved away and naturally lost touch, which makes me hesitant. How do I navigate this kindly and intentionally? Do I have a direct conversation, gradually create space, or is there a more gracious approach I'm missing?
Yeah. I was just going to be, again, my take. As a human being, if in your life you have made the decision to evolve, to change your mind, to grow as a person, a byproduct of being a person who decides to be someone who changes means that you are not going to connect with people that you once did.
Yeah.
And you are faced with the challenging decision, but one that you made when you decided to continue changing and when they decided to not. You now have to make the decision of when it comes to relationships, like who are the people that I want to spend my time around, because time is not an unlimited resource. And so I think you have to filter it through that thought, and I say that because the reality is that you are trading something when you are spending time with a lot of people to try to maintain a connection that's no longer there out of their fear of like misapproval of you. And that's your decision to make. Do I want to trade this time in order to try to continue this relationship? Or is there something else that I should be doing, a different relationship that I should be adding value to? And at the same time, every relationship's goal should not be for you to feel like there's a really strong connection. There are probably some people within that group too that, if you think about what really matters to you, the goal of that relationship isn't for them to add value to you, but for you to add value to them if they really value that relationship. And not every relationship is going to be, in friendship really, is going to have this incredible amount of intellectual and emotional and spiritual like equality. And you do have to kind of pick and choose, when am I going to invest time in something that might not seem like it's adding all of this value back to me. But you do need to make sure that you're not doing that because you don't want them to gossip about you.
Yeah, well, that's it. I think the telltale of that question was, man, what they say about me. because now what you're doing is it now becomes you being around them, like you were saying, perfect. It wasn't about adding value. It's not about being their friend. It's just like you just don't want them to talk bad about you because here's the God honest truth about it. You care about you. You have self worship. You want people to worship you. You don't want people to have a bad thought about you, and so you're just gonna keep doing that. And I get it. Like I totally get that. When I grew up and growing up in Akron, I to be honest with you, I've not been back to Akron in like 20 plus years. And one of the reasons why I went back one time, and I think it was because of being out, and now you're going back there. I had friends who I knew doing the same things, doing the same stuff. Now, I had the benefit that my family had moved. They weren't no longer there, so I didn't have to go back to see my family. So I really didn't have, have my friends there, whatever. But I didn't go back because it was a lot of my friends doing the same stuff. And I had too much, especially playing basketball. I had too much on the line to then, I had friends who were in street life. I had friends who were doing stuff that they shouldn't have been doing. And they were my guys. But I knew if I went back, they're going to be like, yo, why are you not da-da-da? And so for me, I just didn't go. I just stayed so locked in the playing. So it gave me distance. For me, it gave me distance not to go back. That reason. But now if you have to go back, your family's there, whatever. I agree with you. You just have to get to a point to where, man, maybe I think I look more strategically. It's just a gradual separation. Maybe if y'all were hanging out last time you were home like 4 nights out of the week, yeah, you can't just ghost them. But maybe this time, like, hey, I'm going to hang out with them once or maybe twice. Next time, maybe once, maybe twice, and then it's just slowly you just start to distance yourself from that kind of relationship. So
I'm feeling a lot of financial stress and emotional heaviness. How do I be authentic without oversharing or isolating?
Yeah, I think the first place is that you have to do the work. Like we're talking about the preparation work. You have to do a lot of work throughout your day. A lot of times when there's financial pressure over the Christmas holidays and break and all the stuff, because you're trying to buy presents and you're trying to do all those things, what you have to do in those moments, you got to try to get to the bottom and identify what really is that emotion, what's that thing speaking to you in the core of who you are. Is there fear? Is there shame? Is there a lack of belief? Is there a worry that, man, I'm just going to get here? Is it a worry that I'm going to be broke one day and I'm going to be like this one person back in my, be like my mom, and I don't want to be like them in my life? Or what is it? You got to get to the root of that, and you got to spend that time, and you got to voice those real things, because when you don't voice and they just stay there, it ends up now becoming, like we talked about, the anxiety that actually fills up the phone booth and you can't see straight. So I would tell you got to be willing to dump the box, and you also got to be willing to share with people who understand where you're at, who'll be a truth teller, but it's like, hey, right now I'm about to go home. I may need to talk to you a little bit more because I don't want to dump this on my family. I don't want to do this. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit more. Then just have that conversation with your friend.
How do I balance the desire for real rest with the pressure to be available for family, ministry, or work during the holiday season?
I think that growing up is learning how to enter a state of rest, knowing that you are still responsible.
Preach.
I think that we've kind of gathered this idea that in order to hit a state of rest, I have to feel as though I have no responsibilities, maybe to myself or to anyone. I think that even just like pastorally, you could probably speak a ton to what does it actually mean to enter a state of rest that is not just I am now no longer responsible.
Yeah, like I 100% agree. I think what people have to realize is that, you do not lose responsibility. You have to do whatever their job is. And especially, now here's what I will say, then you then need to get a job that's 9 to 5, that has no a state level job, or a job where you go, you work, and man, you don't even think about it. They don't care if you think about it. You don't got to think about it. But understand those types of jobs, you'll make a certain amount of money. You probably won't, for some, you may love it, you may not love it, and it's just going to be the same, but not the same. But but for giving that up, you do have the ability to not have the responsibility of work and stuff. And so you have other freedom. So you take one thing for the other. I think it's immature, it's not growth when you think that you, just because you're gone, you're not responsible. Like, here's the thing, like for me and my wife talk about this all the time. It's like, we own things. It's never off. It's not because we're just people who are just like, man, we are control freaks or doing whatever. It's like, no, we're just the ones that are responsible. I tell people it's a difference between being an employee and being like a partner, right? Because when you're a partner, all of a sudden, like the fire alarm goes off, and when the fire department calls, you're not like, hey, it's my Sabbath, so I'm not going to answer this. Like, no, you freaking, well, you know what, you got to go take care of it. There's so many times early on in ministry where it'd be my day off, and I'm the only one, like the freaking alarm goes off at like the alarm would go off at the church. And police like, hey, we got to go over there. Can somebody meet us there? Okay, and so I had to be the one to go over there and meet them. And it may be 11, 12 o'clock at night, 1 o'clock at night, and I got to turn around and speak the next day. It's what it is. When I was in London, I'm there, I'm enjoying, but we're in the middle of a really big deal. I don't have, even though I felt so rested because I had the right expectation. I knew I wasn't going to shut down, because there's things we have to get done right now that's just important. And I think it's understanding seasons, but I say this, and why I'm so passionate about this is because I think people forget this, because we live in this space, in this world, and I see it a lot in Christianity, where it's this idea, we talk about like rest. Like, I think when you are actually, your soul is at rest in God, when you are walking with Jesus. That's why he says this whole thing of that, like how his burden, you know what I'm saying? He talks about the yoke and the oxen and how it's like light. It's because you're walking alongside with him. That doesn't mean you're not still treading great. You're not working. It's just, it's the motivation, and why you're doing it gives you a greater sense of rest and peace. And I think that's entering into a state of rest. And I'm all about, man, being able to separate from the stuff that you do, having your time off. But when you are in a management leadership position and you have things going on, like, yeah, there's just stuff you have to do. And you really think about it. It's like, oh yeah, we go and it's over Christmas break. Sometimes I notice this with people. It's Christmas break. Like, they went like 2 weeks off of like, I'm not doing any work. I'm like, okay, well, January 1st is coming. So are you prepared for January 1st? Because then what I've noticed, January 1st shows up and stuff's not ready and done. And then it's like, well, I was on my break. That has nothing to do with me. This is what you have to do. And so I just think it's just one of those things that just, you got to be realistic, and it's responsibility. I love how you said that.
There are certain levels of disengaging that I have to do during the holidays in order to survive time with the people I care about, but I don't have patience for certain behaviors they regularly exhibit. How do I learn to better engage with people that don't care to have the conversations that are necessary to change harmful patterns, but I still have to spend time with?
Yeah, I think so much of that has to do with just the standpoint of the person. You haven't built the internal structures that are needed in order to regulate yourself in those kinds of environments yet. And so there's a lot more of process that needs to be worked through before you're even considering being like a change agent or like leading these conversations. Because if you can't enter the conversation just with a level of presence, curiosity, compassion, but also conviction, like where do you truly stand, then you don't have the internal structures yet that are needed to have the conflict that comes with that conversation, and to be the adult and like the leader in that. So I think the primary focus is just not trying to have those conversations yet, as much as it's about how do I continue working through the process of growing in my internal ability to exhibit things like patience and compassion when I feel confused and when I feel anxious, and digging to the deeper whys of when do you feel most confused, when do you feel most anxious, when do you feel most unregulated. Building those skills is really important. And then when you enter those environments, it's a lot more about honestly like mitigating your time in your space, so that you can continue to regulate whenever you're re-entering it. So even if it's when I go home, I stay in a different house, and right now that's just the price that I have to pay in order to stay regulated. Is I need to not be sleeping on the couch. I need to not, like, I need to have my own room. I need to have some distance, or I need to have my car, because I need to have somewhere else to go in order to do that. I think is a lot more important than starting with the conversation of like, how do I, exhibit patience in the conflict.
I think that's, and I love how you said that. And it's just a reminder, like, as you're trying to go forward, get healthy, do those things, you can't have everything. Like, you're going to have to, like, what we tend to do is we want them to change and sacrifice, do all the stuff. And if they just did that, then my life would be easier.
I wouldn't have to feel the pain that I feel
Yes,
right now.
absolutely. And so, like you said, you're like, no, if I'm going somewhere, like, oh, well, they should just change and they should do this, so I should be okay.
So
with
I don't
being
have
there.
to pay
Sleep
for a
on the
hotel
couch.
room.
Yeah, sleep in a hotel, sleep on a
Yeah.
couch, do stuff like that. They should just emotionally get it together, so I'll be fine sleeping on the couch, or they emotionally got it together. But, like, no, you getting good rest is important because of being able to have enough capacity when you go in there. And so I think you do have to have, like, sacrifice, like, when you go. And I think that is an important thing, because what I think it shows, how serious are you about it? Because if you're always putting it on other people for them to change, for you to be fine, then you're not taking ownership and responsibility for yourself, for you to be better, for you to do that. Because let me tell you, yes, it's difficult, and I'm not downplaying any of this stuff, but also you are responsible. You are responsible for how you show up. You're responsible for how you communicate. You're responsible for regulating yourself. So you have to be responsible for whatever it's going to take to be able to do that. You don't, it's like, legitimately, sometimes I feel like it's like people, you would not go into a sporting event or go into a battle and not be prepared. You wouldn't go into a presentation and hopefully you're going to and not be prepared. So these things that are very difficult, you have to be prepared. I think sometimes in life, we don't think about the emotional things. We don't think about the day-to-day stuff like that. And so I think if we actually approached it the way we approach work, or we approach, we approach an event or stuff like that, I think it would change our mindset. I'll give you a practical one. It has nothing to do with, like, holidays, but the thing that started to hit me was, like, man, like, communicating on Sundays, right? Preaching on Sundays is very exhausting. It's like you are literally giving, like, 3 different speeches for 40 minutes. And it's like there's just so much that you give out and all this stuff and blah, blah, blah. Well, I've been doing this for a long time. And, man, it's like on Mondays my body is just like, my body breaks down, all this stuff. Well, I started approaching, I'm like, okay. And I'm like frustrated. I'm like, man, people just need to understand this. And I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? So I started approaching it like, okay, how do they approach games? One of the things that athletes do now is they'll play games, especially like, basketball, whatever, and then they lift weights right after the game. Like, they actually work out again after the game, because, like, the recovery, it makes, like, your body recover better. I'm like, oh, so I just started doing that. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, trying to be consistent. Like, oh, I finished preaching because I'm literally physically giving stuff out. So then I go work out. And I do sauna, blah, 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 whatever. And honestly, like, I did it the other day, and it was actually, and I've done it a few different times. It's actually incredibly helpful for me. But I got to be responsible for that. I can't now blame, like, my wife and kids need to be quiet. They don't need to say anything to me. I got to have this part. And I realized, like, no, I've got to do the process of what it takes to actually get myself healthy. So I think that's really important for people. And I want to stress that as we come to a close, is that, I know it's difficult, and I hope what you do not hear from us, and especially for me, is that, like, that these events and these things are not, like, real for you. But what I do think that has to start being the conversation is, how do we actually genuinely grow in that? Because it's difficult. Because what a lot of people will do right now is they'll pacify you. They'll pacify you like, oh, I know that's tough. I know that's difficult. But sometimes people just need to tell you, no, this is just the really difficult parts of how you actually get better. But I want to stress everybody is that you are responsible. Like, you are responsible for your behavior. You're responsible for how you show up. You're responsible. You are not responsible for them. You're not responsible for your mom, your dad, your siblings. You're not responsible for how they react. You are responsible for you. And so whatever you have to do to prepare yourself to go in there, to be a blessing to them, that's what you have to do. Even when they've been someone who've cursed you, even when they've done stuff that has been harmful for you, you still have a responsibility to be a blessing to them. And so I want to encourage you is to do the hard, deep work before you ever get there, so that you can show up. And whatever you need to do, make sure you do that so that you can represent yourself. And here's the thing, and the changes you have made, because that's the thing. You want to represent those changes you have made in that process. So, okay.
Yeah. I think ultimately self-awareness, it's just not the finish line.
Yep.
Like, having an understanding of feelings
great
and having
point,
an understanding of harm. I think culturally we've really propped that up as if I know more and if I understand this, I'm going to feel less pain and my life is going to be better because we know what is right and we know what is good, and then everybody's going to change to match those rules so that we all feel a little bit less stressed. But like I said, awareness, it's just not the finish line. The goal is once you have an understanding of what's happening, you're also more responsible. So in the same way that like you are not responsible for your parents or your siblings or whatever, if you are an adult, they're not responsible for you. And I think it's really easy to start to maybe generate this mindset that because they didn't give you what you should have received or what you needed emotionally or spiritually or even physically whenever you were 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, that they owe that to you now. Yeah. And while them giving that to you, it would be good and it would be kind and it would at a level provide this experience of reconciliation almost. They still don't owe that to you. And living in a place of expectation of that when you're now somebody who has relationships that can fulfill those things in you, has a faith walk where Jesus can fulfill those things within you, now can fulfill those things for yourself. Like you have the capacity to fulfill those things for yourself too. Living in a place of expecting other people to offer you love and acceptance can create such a bitterness that will halt your life. And those things are a gift. Like it is a gift for someone to give you understanding, to give you love. And I think living in a place where you expect or think that people owe that to you could just be just such a sad place to live and can really halt your life and keep you from moving forward.
Yeah. I don't have anything else to say. That's a great way to end the podcast. So, hey guys, until next time, keep writing new rules.